Tonight's specimen is a person who barely spoke all evening. And by the time the party emptied, 3 separate people called them the best conversationalist in the room. You've been in that room. Someone says almost nothing, and everyone bends toward them like plants toward a window. One person did most of the listening and somehow walked away with all the credit. Why does that work? And here's the uncomfortable part. The same still, total attention that heals you is exactly what an interrogator uses to open you up. So tonight we cut it open. How real attention builds magnetism and how it gets faked. By the end you'll be able to tell in about a minute whether someone is listening to you or listening for something. Let's begin. First, the mechanism. When a quiet person just listens, what are they actually handing you? Tension. Not the polite nodding kind, the rare kind where, for a minute, nothing else in the room exists. Try to name the last time someone gave you that. Most people have to think hard. That difficulty is the whole point. It's scarce. In an ordinary conversation, both people are half-loading their next line. You aren't being heard. You're being waited out. A real listener stops loading. The cue in their head goes quiet, and you can feel the difference land. Because being fully attended to is very close to being seen. And most days, nobody sees you all the way to the edges. William James called it the deepest craving in human nature, to be appreciated. Attention is simply how that debt gets paid. So when a quiet person turns their whole focus on you, they're handing over the scarcest thing in the room. Most people never notice they received it. And you bloom. You get funnier, sharper, more like yourself, because someone is finally holding the light still long enough for you to stand in it. Hold on to this. A good part of the charisma you felt in that moment was your own, switched on by their attention. Now the strange twist. That warm feeling has to get pinned onto someone. And you don't pin it on yourself. You pin it on them. This is the reflected glow. You love how you feel in their presence. And you quietly file that feeling under their name. Dale Carnegie built an empire on one line, be interested, not interesting. This glow is the machine humming underneath it. The talker performs, hoping to be liked. The listener simply lets you like yourself, then collects the credit without asking. You leave thinking, what a fascinating person, and you can't name a single thing they actually said. Because they barely said anything. The fascinating person in that story was you. Replay your last great conversation. Notice how much of it is you talking. That imbalance is the tell. This is why the loudest person rarely owns the room. Performance asks the room to admire you. Attention lets the room expand into you. The quiet one isn't fighting for the spotlight. They're holding it and aiming it at you. Second finding. Magnetism often isn't what you give off. It's the space you make for someone else to. So what does real attention look like on the table? It has moving parts and we can name them. Part 1. They don't reload. When you stop talking, they don't fire a line they had ready. They sit in the gap and actually think. That pause is almost impossible to fake. Most people can't survive 2 seconds of silence. A real listener can. Part 2. The follow-up. Not that reminds me of me, but, and then what did you do? You cannot ask that if you weren't truly there. Part 3. They remember. Weeks later they bring back the small thing you mentioned once and forgot you said. Memory is attention with a receipt. Tells you plainly you mattered enough to keep. Part 4. The withheld turn. They had a story too, and they quietly let it go so yours could keep running. That's the quiet cost. Every turn they don't take is a small gift of the floor handed to you. And scarcity works on words like it works on everything. Someone who speaks rarely, you lean in the moment they finally do. The person who talks least often gets quoted most, because the room isn't drowning in them. Restraint reads as depth. We assume the still water is bottomless, even when no one has measured it. Now flip the slide. Every part you just watched can be lifted out and run as a technique. Attention that looks total but is aimed at getting something. Listening used as a crowbar. So let's say the ethics out loud, once and plainly. You read these to defend yourself, never to run them on the people who trust you. The salesman's practiced attention, the mirrored posture, the warm nod, the endless tell me more. All of it pointed at your wallet. The interrogator listens harder than your closest friend ever has. Attention is not always affection. The group that floods you with focus in week 1, that makes you feel finally understood, that's a harvest, not an interest. So how do you separate the gift from the harvest? For tells, drawn straight from the mechanism. Tell 1. Where the attention points afterward. Real listening leaves you feeling more like yourself. Extractive listening leaves you having agreed to something. Watch the 10 minutes after you feel deeply heard. If an ask quietly arrives, the attention was the setup for it. Tell 2. Symmetry over time. A real listener eventually opens up too. The attention becomes a trade, not a one-way pour. The extractor never spends. Weeks in, they know everything about you and you know almost nothing about them. Tell 3. The shape of the follow-ups. A friend's questions wander with you. A harvester's questions funnel, always steering back toward one thing. Notice if every gentle tell me more bends toward the same place. Money, access, the thing they came for. Tell 4. Does the attention survive you being useless to them? Watch how they listen the moment you can't do anything for them. The gift keeps listening when there's nothing left to get. The technique clicks off the second you stop being of use. Knowing the tells won't switch off the glow. Being listened to feels good even after you've clocked the game. So the defense isn't suspicion. It's the clock. Last cut. What do you do with this? Run it clean and spot it dirty. Running it clean is not a listening technique. Techniques are the harvester's tools. Reach past them. It's simpler and harder than a technique. Get genuinely curious about one person and stop loading your next line. Ask the second question, then the third. Let the silence sit there instead of rushing to fill it with yourself. You'll feel the pull to jump in with your own version. Every single time you don't is a small gift of the floor. Do it enough and people will start calling you a wonderful talker on the evenings you barely spoke a word. Now spot it dirty. When a near stranger makes you feel dazzlingly interesting, fast, don't argue with the feeling. Just quietly start the clock. Think of the last person who felt like the best listener you'd ever met. Then ask the quiet question, what did they want next? That's tonight's finding. Charisma isn't always the person filling the air with themselves. Sometimes it's the one who went still and quiet so that you could finally hear yourself think. So keep the sentence that matters. The quietest person in the room is often holding the most, and you should always know whether they're giving attention or taking it. Case closed. The most magnetic person in the room is usually the one who let you be the most interesting one in it. Same table next week.